and welcome to Dungeons and Drama Nerds. My name is Nick Orvis, and today I'll be joined by my esteemed co-producer, Percy Hornak.
Hello.
We're here to introduce the next game we're playing on the podcast, which is Stillfleet, designed by Wythe Marschall and published by Stillfleet Studio. Our goal today is to give you a brief overview of how the system works, so you can jump right into the first actual play episode and follow along with our intrepid crew of void miners. In related news, that very first actual play episode is available to listen to right now on this feed.
Whoa! In terms of our upcoming release schedule, our Stillfleet campaign will release about 3 times a month with a 1-week break between batches of episodes, and we'll be airing these episodes through the next 4 months or so you have lots of delightful content to look forward to.
So without any further ado, let's jump right into how to play Stillfleet. So, Stillfleet is a far future science fiction role-playing game where you play a crew of void miners who work for the Worshipful Company of Stillfleeters, or the Co for short. Your job is to explore ruined spacecrafts called hulks and habitable planets previously cut off from contact with the greater galaxy known as rocks. Void miners travel to hulks and rocks through time-space gates called stiffworks that connect such destinations to the Co's home base, Spindle, via tunnels called Malkovich tunnels that can be tacked to specific destinations. The quick start for the game describes it this way. I'm going to read a chunky paragraph of delicious lore. Stillfleet is a far-future science fiction role-playing game, a wild, slimy, non-human-centric, and hybrid-happy setting that lends itself both to dystopian narratives of life after the capitalism that we know, the post-apocalyptic, as well as stories of life under some weird new revenant version of that capitalism, the post-post-apocalyptic, here called the post-future. The main takeaway is that, in the end, the Worshipful Company is not good. It is simply all that the characters know. It is up to them to chart out new territory in new ways, to choose curiosity over conflict, and to survive the horrors of ancient bloody history. End quote. So that's the pitch. And the short version of the immediate setup is that you all live on Spindle, which is a sort of Lovecraftian space station out in the middle of the void. But 20 years ago, a tachyon storm emanating from the future, according to the senior archivists of the Co., cut all the tacks to and from Spindle, all of the connections that those stiffworks allow them to use. But just this year, tachyon spikes fell to levels that made it safe to retack stiffworks and send void miners out into the vast galaxy to explore hulks once again. So you're kind of emerging from this period of isolation to explore strange new worlds that have been cut off from what passes for civilization for you for a long time.
The core rhythm of the game is a cycle of what are called ventures, or missions that are assigned to the party by the Co. It is an unavoidable given circumstance of the game that you are a void miner in the employ of the Worshipful Company. Whether or not that lasts is up to you. The void miners will tack out from Spindle to whatever hulk or rock their venture takes them to. They will hopefully achieve their objective. Then they return to Spindle to submit a report of what happened on their venture, collect payment, and level up. Rinse and repeat. On these ventures, void miners will encounter aliens, deadly xenofauna, and useful junk from the deep past called Archaeotech.
And on that note of useful junk from the deep past, I should say that we are skipping over a ton of really fascinating lore. This is a far, far future sci-fi game, and though it doesn't give you a blow-by-blow of all of the intervening years, there's a lot of delicious, weird stuff both in the backstory of the game and its present.
Particularly, I'll note that we're skipping over a lot of the really specific way that Wythe and the other folks who worked on the game are framing humanity and humans' relationship to what was once Earth, which in this game is called Terra. There's a lot of really specific and really interesting details about that we have sort of hopped over because you don't really need to know all of that in order to understand what's going on, but it is very cool.
Yeah, and some of that you'll encounter in our campaign. But we also highly encourage you to pick up the core rulebook and see how intricate and exciting the world of Stillfleet is.
Speaking of how intricate and exciting the world of Stillfleet is, we're going to start by talking a little bit about character creation and the character options available, some of which you might see in the campaign, some of which you will not see in our campaign, because there are, in fact, only so many player characters to be had. Characters in Stillfleet are distinguished by their class and their species, in the vein of other games that are sort of on this like class plus ancestry-based character creation system. Classes include standard co-jobs like a Banshee, who are the pilots responsible for tacking stiffworks and allowing us to visit hulks and rocks. This role is so necessary to the party that if your party does not contain a Banshee, one will be assigned to you, an NPC one will, because quite literally within the fiction of the game, you can't leave without a Banshee to pilot you out of the Malkovich tunnel. There are also Still Riders, who are fighters and protectors, and I will note that Still Rider has a silent J in it.
If that gives you. J.
There are Razzies, which are rangers and scouts, peers, who are doctors and scholars, and many, many more company jobs that sort of cover, I would say, like a pretty standard range of like some charisma and face type roles, sort of combat-based roles, support-based roles. Like it covers sort of the gamut of those sorts of things. There are also what the book calls weirdo party crashers, who are classes that tap into what's called hell science or nanotech and get sort of special powers. So those would be adjacent to your sort of like magic using classes, but the Co is not are not fans of these classes for reasons of like lack of control. In the lore of the game, hell science is a practice that allows one to tap into what is called the weird. It is this world's sort of analog for inexplicable mental abilities, psionics, unique powers, strange phenomena, all of that like science fiction or magic stuff. The Co is afraid of hell science. It considers anyone who taps into it or is able to access the weird dangerous freaks and threats to its own existence. There is one class called a Tremulant, which you will see in our campaign. Tremulants study hell science for the Co. They're employed by the archivists. They follow one of 6 unique paths that like take specific approaches to studying and harnessing the weird, or harness specific aspects of the weird. So Tremulants are kind of Co-approved, but like tenuously. And Blooders and Snakeheads, which are the other 2 weirdo party crasher, or rather, they're 2 of the other weirdo party crasher classes, are outside of the control of the Co.
Yeah. One of the things I really find interesting about this game is how, and that I think we'll probably talk more about in an upcoming commentary episode, is how the classes, quote-unquote classes, are in fact straight-up jobs, and they are very tightly tied to the fiction. Like you said, Percy, there's the whole, like, if you don't have a Banshee, one will be assigned to you thing, which I think is fun. And I was going to say, one of the classes that's also in Weirdo Party Crashers is the Jackal/Mouse, which is sort of the, like, you can think of it as an equivalent of a rogue class, but it belongs in the Weirdo Party Crashers, even though it doesn't have much going on with hell signs, because it is just like, oh, you're like a career criminal who has scammed your way into like doing this, but you are not. I don't remember the details, but either you're not actually employed by the Co, or you like are, but you're doing your own like side hustle. So I find it interesting how tightly the classes are tied to like very specific fiction.
Yeah, as opposed to just sort of like in D&D, like your class is like, this is how I relate to the world and how I understand my mission in life.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, no, actually, you are paid. you get paid by the company to do this job.
Yeah. So, well, I love that some of the weirdo party crashers are like, yeah, you're a rogue scion who harnesses Escher-esque powers, and then some of them are just like, oh yeah, you're just an orphan who stowed away.
Yeah, you stowed away on Spindle, and the company doesn't know what to do with you.
Yeah. But those are, so that gives you a sense of the array of the classes in sort of one sentence. But in addition to the classes, there are countless species available for player characters in Stillfleet, ranging from spindle-born humans, who are called fleeters, who's, I would say, sort of the norm, the baseline, the, I guess, sort of generic human of so many games, to humanoid crickets called wettins, to automatons made of smoky quartz, sapient cactuses, and holograms. Like your class, your species gives you some choices of powers that you can have. Percy, just because so many of them are so flavorful, do you have a favorite species?
I do. My favorite is the Gelasti, who you will, spoilers, meet in our campaign in some capacity. They are salamander people who live in a region of Old Terra. Some of their special powers include breathing underwater, they have healing saliva, and they can detect electrical currents, which I think is extremely cool. And they are pacifists.
Yes. I have my own favorite species that you will also meet in our campaign, which is called the Mongrel, described as tiny-faced bear mutant crusader. I will say it's a spoiler about me, but I am a big sucker for an anthropomorphic bear, particularly in a sci-fi setting. I think every sci-fi setting should have like weird aliens and then just like a bear in power armor. This is the second sci-fi game I've encountered that has this as a significant player option, and I think that's delightful. But these bears are not just bears. The mongrels have been sent backwards in time by a mysterious group called the Yellow Monks to assassinate quote-unquote demons, and it's not clear what that means, and also it's sort of up to every individual mongrel to figure out what that means. But I just love the lore of like, yes, this is a species that doesn't exist yet. Every member of this species that you meet has been sent to you from the future to fuck up aliens. Yeah, I find them delightful. And also, you get to be a bear in power armor with a machine gun.
It's pretty good.
That's all I want from a role-playing game.
I will also note that we mentioned fleeters, which are humans born on spindle. There are mechanical distinctions between humans who were born on Terra and humans who were in cryosleep for many, many years and have only just awakened. So there are other kinds of humans, but they are distinct from one another because what are called conscripts are recruited from Terra. And sleepers are humans who were sleeping on the job.
And Terra is one of the reasons it's different. Terra is, if I recall correctly, a sort of like blasted apocalyptic hellscape.
Yeah, unbelievably dangerous.
Yes. Yeah. So you've got that going on, which is fun.
I will also note that we are, Nick and I have both just lied to you, which is to say that our kind of, at least my real favorite, is so unique and delightful that we are in fact not going to tell you what it is until you listen to the actual campaign, because one of our player characters was lovingly coerced into playing this species because we all think that it was just so cool. So stay tuned, and I'm sure you can guess which one we think is extremely fucking cool.
I'll be curious what people think it is. Write in to our email and let us know after you hear the first actual play episode which you think our favorite species is.
Indeed. This class and species combination was so unanticipated that the designer of the game, who listened to our first session, was like, that's interesting. We had not sort of accounted for somebody who would want to do that.
Isn't it? Didn't Wythe give us like loving permission to break the rules on it? Isn't it not supposed to work? Like,
actually, yes, that's exactly what it is. Is Wythe is like, technically this should not be able to happen, but you should still do it.
Yeah.
So, moving on to powers, which come both from your class and your species. These are special abilities that are specific to your character. They range from like combat moves or things that are similar mechanically to like casting a spell or something like that. And some of them are like passive effects. A lot of the charisma based ones are passive effects where you have like a passive bonus to interactions with certain kinds of people or a passive bonus when you're trying to do something specific. Nick has pulled some examples of different special abilities.
Yeah, I like the range of the powers. So just the sort of escalating examples I've picked out here. There's a class called the Factor, which is sort of the middle management / party boss. You work for the Co. You're a representative of the Co.
Yeah, of note, the person who gives you your ventures, your assignment from the company, is given to you by a refactor, who is like the tier above your factor.
Yeah. So factors have a power they can pick called Bark, which is super, super simple, where it's just like you give somebody an order, which encourages them to do it, and it lets you burn grit, which we'll talk about in a minute, to give an ally a bonus equal to the grit you burn. Simple, easy. A peer power, and the peers are the sort of doctors, so I find this one interesting, is called Extend Self, and this lets you use some grit to set a small object in motion toward any being on the same planetoid as you, and it will find them eventually, but I can't stress that this is not, I can't stress enough that this is not a, like, combat hurl a thing at someone like the,
no, it's like it follows.
Yeah, it's like roll, it will arrive at, it will bump into them in 4d6 hours. Which is just sort of delightful and weird, and like I'm very curious about the, use cases for that. And then you get to the really weird end, which is the one of the bludder powers, which is the bludder is a sort of weird sorcerer, has a power called Wear the World Skin, which I wrote here, lets you turn into Red Hulk. I'm not a comic book person, so it should be noted, I don't actually know what Red Hulk's distinctions from Garden Variety Hulk is, but it does, it makes you Hulk out and get big and strong and tough and angry, I think, and also specifically red. It says that in the power description, is that you turn red. So that gives you a sort of sense of like all of these are powers that you can choose as you create a character and as you level up. So it gives you a whole range from like very simple to really dramatic and exciting. In addition to the powers, when you're creating your character, you will also ultimately choose a hustle, which is your former career or perhaps even a current day job that you have in addition to this very dangerous, like, stiff work exploration for the Co. And you choose at least one telos. The telos is a really interesting, fun character-defining thing. It is basically your motivation. So you choose a primary telos, which is something like adrenaline or melancholy or profit. There's a specific list that the book gives you that I don't have in front of me right now. But what's fun about the telos is that when you act according to your primary telos, you get to gain 2 grit or add 2 to your next roll, but acting explicitly against it, if your telos is adrenaline and you're like, no guys, I think we should play it safe, we should we should approach this cautiously and carefully and slowly, you can be called out by another player as like, hey, wait a minute, isn't your telos adrenaline, which causes you to lose 2 grit and grants them 2 grit or a +2 on a roll, which is a really interesting, like, mutual accountability, but also, like, really incentivizes the light policing of one another, I think.
It does also say in the book that, like, this is a sort of optional mechanic at the table that's largely in place to, like, encourage you to think about what your character would do and act in accordance to that. And there is a sort of wink nudge note that is like, hey, if it's not fun for you to call each other out in this way, if you would rather all unionize against the GM, then also you could do that.
Yeah, don't be a cop about it. But if
also,
you want...
Ben Ferber contractually only runs games for our podcast in which there is some kind of antagonistic relationship between the GM and the players.
That is true, yes. If you want to dive further into Stillfleet's approach to character creation and the breadth of class and species options available to players, stay tuned because we are going to have a commentary episode on character customizability where we'll talk about that, not only in this game, but also about how that kind of approach to game design works in other RPGs as well.
So now that we've talked a little bit about how one makes characters in Stillfleet, we're going to talk about the core mechanical system at the heart of the game, which is called the grit system. And Stillfleet Studio has sort of taken this system and expanded it and is now designing other games using this system, but it originates with Stillfleet. The core resolution mechanic in Stillfleet is that you are rolling a single die and trying to beat the number 6. The type of die one rolls depends on what they're trying to do. Similar to games like Kids on Bikes, you have different dice, a d12, d10, d8, etc., that are mapped to different core scores, which represent your core abilities. These are combat, movement, reason, will, and charm. There are different arrays of dice that you could choose. There are some arrays where your lowest is a d6, so you just have to roll the highest on that, but there is a chance of success. There are others that are a little bit more min-maxy, where one of your dice is a d4, which means you would only ever be able to succeed on a check with that skill if you got help from somebody, which is interesting to me. You might get advantage or disadvantage on a roll because of a class power or the circumstances in which you're acting, which means you roll 2 of the same die and take the higher result. Crucially, in Stillfleet, if you roll a 1 on your die, no matter what roll it is or how much help you have, you automatically fail, regardless of you can't spend points to boost it. You can't do any of that. You fail if you get a 1, point blank.
Yeah.
Characters have access to 2 pools, which are called health and grit. You burn points from these pools to use abilities or when your character takes damage. Health represents your body's robustness. It's similar to hit points in other games. If you run out of health, you are prone, you are unable to act, you are... I think you're still conscious, but like mechanically you're kind of like not able to do anything. Like
you're out of the action.
Indeed. Grit, which is the central mechanic of the game's core system, and like a very important part of playing this game is actually using your grit. It is not like a precious commodity to hold on to and save. You want to be burning it as much as possible in order to succeed, because the game's world is very harsh and cruel and makes it hard for you to succeed. Grit represents your ability to perform stressful activities like reading someone's mind or attacking multiple times in a split second, which translates to it is the resource that you use to activate many of your special abilities. Yeah. So if you want to use any of your powers or you want to use certain moves, you got to burn grit. You can... The main way that one might use grit in Stillfleet is to give yourself a boost. You can spend 3, 6, or 9 grit in order to give yourself +3, +6, or +9 to your roll, which would almost certainly mean like you will succeed at whatever it is you're trying to do, since you're just trying to beat a 6. Wythe, the game designer, notes that this boost mechanic is perhaps the most important in the game, and notes in the section on here in the handbook, quote, "In terms of game mechanics, Stillfleet revolves around a core wager. How much grit are you, the player, willing to spend to overcome the challenge currently being thrown at you by the GM?" End quote. Which is to say, there is this kind of like, the world is extremely challenging. You have this like pool of resources that you can use, and the game is sort of daring you to use it as much as possible.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, you mentioned the kind of min-maxy arrays earlier. We're thinking about the D4, an array that has a D4 in it is also like, you're going to be burning grit more, because if you want to succeed, you either need help or you're like, okay, anytime I need to use this ability, if I want to succeed, I have to be prepared to burn grit.
Yeah, and also it encourages you to play to your telos as well, because you can regain grit by acting in accordance with it. So if you're able to be like, oh, I'm fulfilling my deception telos by attempting to read the mind of this person so I can lie to them more effectively, I get 2 grit back. There is a little bit of like a gaming the system sort of energy that can start to develop, because you're like really gonna want to get as much grit as possible.
Yeah.
In that vein, when you run out of points in both pools, your character dies. Running out of health, as I mentioned, renders you prone, unable to act, down for the count. Running out of grit makes you sort of just exhausted, unable to use special powers, but you're still in it, you're in the scene, you're able to do other stuff that doesn't use grit. Or hopefully you can regain some grit.
Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good overview of the mechanics. So I'm just going to ask you, Percy, what are you most excited about for this as we launch our actual play of Stillfleet?
Something that we didn't mention, but we will talk about in future commentary episodes quite a bit, is that this is an explicitly leftist game, as I'm sure you surmised from the way the game's description talks about capitalism and our sort of relation to capitalism. The world building of the game is probably the thing I find most exciting about it, and specifically the tension between playing a character who must work for the worshipful company and the reality that the Co is like transparently bad and exploitative, and what that means and how that invites you as a player to sort of think about how you can break this relationship or how you want to respond to that relationship, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. That's also something I'm very excited for, to see how that develops in this actual play. I'm also really excited for like gonzo weird sci-fi. I feel often that not enough RPGs really explore the weirdest edge of weird potential in role playing. Maybe this is because so much of the medium is rooted in fantasy, which has a sort of like humanocentric bent, at least in the West. And maybe it's because I was just reading something by Marcus Mondola that argued that there's always a degree of anthropomorphization in role-playing because, like, we are role-playing. So even if our character is, he says something like, even if you're playing a rock or a tree or something, you have to kind of filter that through your own perceptive lens. But I like games where you can try to imagine what it is like to be a sentient cactus or a, like, orb of cosmic energy that builds itself a body out of wood, or a tiny-faced bear in power armor. And I want more games like that, so I'm very excited by the weird and the wacky and the inhuman in this role-playing game.
Hell yeah. Both of us can affirm you are in for a treat as we air our upcoming Stillfleet actual play campaign. We have a lot of very special things in store for you all. Now that you're up to speed on how to play Stillfleet, please do hop over to that first episode of our actual play campaign because it is out now on our main feed. Stay tuned for the rest of the campaign, which will air in the coming weeks, and we will see you all then.
Dungeons & Drama Nerds is produced by Percival, Hornak, and Nicholas Orvis, and co-produced, mixed, and edited by Ben Ferber. If you'd like to help us continue exploring the intersections of theater and tabletop role-playing games, consider leaving us a review on your podcast app of choice, or supporting us on Patreon, which gets you access to our patron-only bonus content, including our patron-exclusive show, Skit Bash. You can find us at patreon.com/dungeonsanddramanerds. You can find our social media, website, and cast bios at the link tree in our show notes. Our core ensemble members are Todd Brian Backus, Jovane Caamaño, Anthony Sertel Dean, Christopher Diercksen, Ben Ferber, Kory Flores, Mieko Gavia, Tess Huth, Romana Isabella, John Johnson, CJ Linton, C. Meaks Meaker, Leo Mock, Phan, and Tristan B. Willis. Tune in next week for another exciting episode.